Hello, I'm Jan Painter, and I would like to welcome you again to our program, Politics Matters. Our guest today is Bob Gibson, Executive Director of the Sorensen Institute for Political Leadership. Bob Gibson is a graduate of the University of Virginia and grew up in Arlington County. In 1972, he graduated from the university with a BA degree in Government and Foreign Affairs. Before coming to the Sorensen Institute for Political Leadership in March of '08, Bob was a political writer, columnist, and editor at the Charlottesville Daily Progress for 30 years, where he specialized in covering local, state, and national politics. He has won numerous Virginia Press Association awards, the 1993 Virginia Bar Association Award in the field of law and justice, and the 1993 Southern Journalism Award for investigative reporting concerning racial inequities in sentencing. He is a frequent guest on public radio's WAMU's Kojo Namdi show in Washington and serves as host of WVTF's Evening Edition on public radio. He also authors the enlightening Daily Progress's Blogging Virginia Politics with Bob Gibson. Now more than ever, there's a strong need in our nation for an informed and knowledgeable citizenry, for voters to be paying attention. To fail to do so is to imperil our democracy and threaten its demise through passivity and apathy. We quite literally, at this moment, cannot afford it. How and where we receive our news is a matter of personal choice, but in a free society, we need to keep our options and eyes open. Journalism matters because it aids us in making informed decisions based on verifiable information, not supposition, fancy, or outright fabrication. We need the news in order to better understand who we are as human beings, as parents, children, husbands and wives, employers and caregivers. In a very real way, we are the news. We need to preserve and protect access to it in all its daunting complexity. Now, we all understand that the manner in which we receive our news is changing, and in the 21st century, we need to remain flexible and open to any and all new opportunities for good information. We are fortunate to have with us today a man who has devoted his career to the open and free exchange of ideas, both in traditional print media, in radio, the blogosphere, and now in a foundation which engages in training our future leaders and lawmakers in the Commonwealth. So where do we go from here with respect to how we receive our news? Mr. Gibson will be our guide today on that sometimes disorienting path in the service of truth. Welcome, Mr. Gibson.
Thank you for having me on the program.
First of all, Bob, tell us a little bit about your background. What led you to journalism as a career?
Well, when I came to the University of Virginia from Arlington, where I'd graduated from high school, UVA was all male, and it was quite a different institution, much smaller than it is today. And it didn't have journalism. It had the traditional academic curriculum, but no journalism school, no journalism taught. But it had journalism in terms of the Cavalier Daily and student radio stations, two very active student stations. And I got involved in those and just loved it, just ate it up, and spent as much time, maybe more, doing radio news than I did work in various classes. So I caught the bug at an early age.
Bob, how did the Sorensen Institute come into being? Who founded it? When was it begun? And what are some of his the ethical focuses for the program?
Well, 17 years ago, two Charlottesville businessmen, Michael Bills and Lee Middleditch, had the same idea at roughly the same time. They thought that Virginia could use an institute for political leadership that trained individuals from both political parties and taught them how to get along together and work across the aisle, because there was a great deal of worry then, and there still is today, about partisanship becoming so overbearing that the two sides can't work together. And they looked at the University of North Carolina, which has a leadership institute with some good training, and they found a model there, and the University of North Carolina program actually introduced them to each other. So they founded the Sorensen Institute in Charlottesville, and we go all over the state of Virginia, and we find young men and young women and college leaders and high school leaders who are in the business of caring about their community and getting involved. And we teach them ethics. They all learn the difference between the short-term and the long-term good, which is really one of the basic ethical problems that we wrestle with in our politics today. Are we going to do something that is good for the country or the community 10 years down the road, or are we going to do something that matters only for the next election? And unfortunately, we've become more of a short-term body politic, that we care only about what's right around the corner and what's immediately on the table. And we don't have as much interest in the long term as we should. So we get these groups of roughly equal numbers of Democrats and Republicans together, and they learn to enjoy talking to each other and getting to know each other and working together across the aisle. And that's what Sorensen is really about.
I think, I know when we were talking before the program, you mentioned that graduates of the program form long-lasting friendships and business and personal relationship as a result.
We have 1,300 people who have graduated from Sorensen programs over the last 17 years. And 17 of them are in the Virginia General Assembly, 2 of them are in the U.S. Congress, and about 125 have been elected to city councils and boards of supervisors. Ann Malik, the chair of the Albemarle County Board, James Brown, the sheriff of Charlottesville, Chip Harding, the sheriff of Albemarle, are all graduates of our programs. And they learn to work together. They really do a good job of thinking across the aisle and including people. More people are being included in local decision making, which is a good thing.
How do you see funding for it moving forward?
Well, we fund roughly half our programs with tuition, and it's relatively inexpensive. And the rest we go out and we raise money from foundations, from individuals, from businesses, from groups, community groups. And we have a fundraiser every year in April in the Richmond area now, where we bring together the leadership of the General Assembly and celebrate that and raise money. Well, probably $200,000 will be raised at our April gala.
Well, this is great. I think it's wonderful for people to know about this. Now let's turn to our topic for today's discussion, why journalism matters and the striking changes to news coverage that we all experience every day. So much has been written about the imminent demise of traditional newspapers in our country, and we've, of course, seen them shrink, go out of business. Something I think a lot of people think about is Twain. You know, are the reports of the death of journalism in papers greatly exaggerated? What do you think?
I hope they're greatly exaggerated. I think our journalism and our politics are changing at an ever-increasing rate. The rapid change in journalism is very unsettling to the business. They are finding new business models that can work for newspapers in the internet age. Radio and television is also cutting back as advertising has shifted. They have to find working business models, and they've also started cooperating with nonprofit groups, as the Daily Progress has done with the Charlottesville Tomorrow outfit. So I think new partnerships are going to change the way media is covering the news and the way the platforms are for reporting the news.
Talk with, if you would, a little bit about the history of journalism. Were papers fully autonomous at the beginning of our republic? Who ran them and how were they funded?
They were. Many of them were party organs, as the system has developed in many European countries, where you buy a liberal paper or a conservative paper, and in our national media there's a great trend in that direction. You know, more Republicans will watch their news on Fox News, more Democrats will watch their news on MSNBC today, because we all tend to live in communities where we live with and talk to folks who agree with us. And we tend to self-select our news from outlets that don't challenge us as much as we perhaps should be challenged. We tend to go for opinion that we agree with. So I think it's very helpful for individuals to look at all of the media that's available and to pick and choose not just things that we agree with, but outlets that perhaps challenge us.
I think it's also important for people to understand just what you just talked about, that in our history there were a lot of dirty tricks that go all the way back to the time of the founders. This is, as you point out, human nature, and sometimes we tend to idealize the way it was. Did papers in the late 18th century focus more on local or international news as a rule?
They focused on politics a great deal. They covered speeches in their entirety. They would print presidential candidates and debates as if that was the news of the day. And they would, the presidential debates often lasted hours. They weren't the 90-minute or 60-minute TV events that we see today with candidates just sort of spouting out, headlines. They tended to be real debates where real positions would be developed and challenged and defended. And these were reported in great detail in the newspapers of the day. And the newspapers, as I said, tended to be partisan. So many individuals would buy a paper and know the partisan leaning of the news outlet. You don't always see that today. You don't know, in many cases, what the biases of the new media outlets are. So I think Americans are learning new news sources and coming to trust some and not trust others, and that's a very difficult and unsettling process.
Yeah, turning back to the present, what is meant by the term specifically, I think for people, advocacy journalism, and as we're coming to understand it now?
Advocacy journalism it can be a very valuable thing. People with a cause, people who want to change the world, people who want to take the country in a different direction. And there is more of that. There are more organizations that are doing long-term investigative reporting, and generally they do buy into advocacy journalism. There are others that are forming that are taking the traditional tack of pursuing the truth wherever it leads without a preordained direction. And we tend to trust, I think, those a little bit more because they have a track record, the good ones, of being balanced.
Can the traditional watchdog function of the Fourth Estate survive, given this proliferation of varying forms of media, would you say?
It has to. If we don't have a watchdog function, then we have a lapdog function, and that doesn't serve the voter very well. We need journalism that goes out and challenges what is being given reporters as the facts. We need to look behind the facts and find out where they're coming from and what the interests are of the people who are giving us those facts. Local government and state government and the federal government today are even more than ever in the news business themselves. They are putting out news as if it was the entire package and expecting people to buy it. And I think Americans have to be a little bit skeptical and have to look behind where those governments are putting out facts.
You raise an interesting point. When I was preparing for this program, I was looking at Alex Jones' very helpful book, Losing the News. And he cites an example with the very good journalist Ron Suskind, who's discussing with the White House operative what he should do and whether he can go ahead with this article in spite of the fact there was objection to it and so forth. And he was told, well, you guys really work in a reality-based profession. And he said, well, actually, I thought that was the definition of what journalism was. And that's an interesting and somewhat disturbing point, and maybe now more than ever, we really do need the Fourth Estate.
We definitely do. People who spin the news in one direction or another are paid a lot more than people who actually cover the news as reporters. If you're interested in journalism, it's a wonderful field to get into, but you're not going to get rich doing it. You're going to do it because of your passion for reporting and for following the truth wherever it takes you. And people who spend a lot of time in the news business and then go into the spin business get paid a heck of a lot more money to tell you which way you should be reporting. And reporters have to follow in various forms other people so that they are presenting a balanced viewpoint rather than just being spun by whoever is paying the most money to spin the news.
Well, and it just means that journalism morphs into advertising.
There's so many lines that have disappeared, unfortunately, that used to be observed. The line between news and entertainment, there used to be a solid line there. It is completely gone. Politics and so much of our news is covered as entertainment, and it's more important than that.